I was reminded recently of a poem I wrote back on November 15th, 2021. I say that I wrote it, but it's more so the other way around. An essence wrote through human form. The title is Born Again, and it goes like this. I crossed a threshold today that had long gone undetected. It met me at a beginning where a cycle's end connected. There a path continued that I had walked many times before, one beckoning my return, but in which interested me no more. Then, in a matter of seconds, another path appeared. I couldn't see far past the start, but it seemed splendid and cleared. To enter this newfound route, I had to present the magic key. It was not a word alone, but an action to show I was free. At first I was unsure, for I thought I had arrived unprepared. So I chose to review the cycle which this juncture divinely bared. I witnessed my prior behavior and old patterns of communication. I began to see them differently due to a reconstructed foundation. An epiphany came to me too, and I understood how to start anew. The key was to see through the lens of a loving point of view. I showed compassion and forgiveness to experiences that had lacked them both, intending to carry that with me, upon which I unlocked a fresh round of growth. It feels amazing to me that the Earth has completed 4 trips around the sun since this poem initially came through. This one in particular was the 16th out of a total of 19 that emerged between October 12th of 2021 and January 25th of 2022. Throughout that span of approximately 15 weeks, I almost couldn't help but express in rhythmic prose what was being felt, experienced, and witnessed so deeply within. It was as though a creative dam had cracked open, flooding my conscious awareness with an intensity of drive that I can only describe as transcendent. But then, just like that, the dam closed once more. Or at least it appeared to. I'm recalling in this moment that it was within this time frame of creative outpour that my grandfather passed. I consider that loss to be a big contributor to my shift away from living in Portland, Oregon, and toward moving back east. When I made my moving intentions known to a close friend, she suggested that I look at the Hudson Valley. I did some digging up and down the region, not really familiar with any of the locations beyond name. Being across country at the time, what became a significant resource for me were YouTube videos of people simply driving through towns and cities. Videos driving through Troy became my first views of the city. It was as soon as February of 2022 that I took a trip back east to visit Troy in person for the first time. I remember that trip like it was yesterday, driving into the city through 787, looking at downtown apartments on River Street. It was a very cold, overcast day. I wouldn't say that I immediately fell in love with the city, but there was a certain charm that I couldn't shake. By the time I was back in Portland, I hadn't yet found an apartment that felt fitting, but I did know that Troy was it. I couldn't quite explain it, yet I trusted nonetheless. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon an apartment that I instantly loved and signed the lease for. It was move-in ready as of April 2022, and it's been my place of residence ever since, for which I am truly, deeply grateful. So why am I storytelling about this? Well, there's something about this experience that may interestingly relate to an experience I've been appearing to have since the hours leading up to 2025. On New Year's Eve, I had a feeling about this year's trip around the sun that appeared to arise rather unexpectedly and suddenly. It was as though I could feel into the year as a whole, and in that I could feel a sense of enormity. This sensing was very unusual beyond the bigness of it. This was the first time I could consciously recall ever feeling any sensation about an upcoming year. I responded to this experience as I tend to. I stayed present with myself and gave myself a safe space to express and explore whatever appeared to come through. Emotions that were stirring, inquiries that were surfacing, and unknowns that were presenting. I processed for a while and then let it all go, intending to move on in other directions, including in the direction of this video. At first, there were thoughts of just continuing to explore topics of interest that may or may not be related to preceding videos. Several ideas are percolating that I feel a gravitation toward, and yet over this past weekend, I realized something that really shifted my attention. With the exception of a zoning board of appeals meeting, the remainder of the week was clear from any additional town meetings and/or events, which was rare. This silence provided an opportunity for me to give attention toward a desire I've had for a while, to focus on reviewing the content I've posted thus far to potentially map out key ideas and overall themes. I've felt a desire to update the channel with more clarity around what it's about, but that's for it to tell me. So, over 2.5 days this week, I watched the first 7 videos I've posted since last May. I wanted to hear what wanted to speak. It was quite intensive, but very worthwhile. Which brings me back to the poem, because it was through this rewatching that I was initially reminded of it. More specifically, it was the wording of the first stanza that was really standing out to me. The rest I couldn't even consciously remember. That first part regarded a beginning where cycles end connected. To a degree, that's what the current moment feels like in a significant way. It's a moment where I see myself coming back to a beginning of liberated, transcendent creativity. An experience that, for the past 2+ years living in Troy, I thought had disappeared, been quieted, halted. Perhaps I was looking for that expression to be in similar form, that of poetic, rhythmic, succinct prose. I had tried my hand at writing numerous times since 2022, but no sooner did I pick the pen up than I put the pen down. It just wasn't moving, wasn't flowing. For the first year or so I lived in Troy, I didn't even feel connected to the city because of the little interaction and participation I engaged in. I do have a tendency to be quite the hermit. But something changed after the first year, and I began to become very interested in its history. There were times where I was nearly manic and obsessed, reading more and more and more, going down rabbit holes that are quite esoteric. I still haven't finished Reminiscences of Troy by John Woodworth from in or around 1860, but it remains on the bucket list. Simultaneously to conducting this research, I was continuing to both deeply self-reflect on personal patterns and on metaphysical ontology more generally. This I had been intensely engrossed in throughout the last 2 years living in Portland. The love I feel for exploring deep reflections, coupled with a growing interest in Troy, seemed to birth a desire to become more consciously aware of the operations, processes, and patterns expressing within the social fabric here. Essentially, the flow of resources. Which leads me back to this video, and this year. In watching the first 7 videos I've posted since last May, I realized that this channel is liberated creativity all over again. Except this time around, it's more lasting and grounded. It's grounded in a vision of reality where the exchange of resources is experienced beyond the attachments to them as the dominant form of self-identification. That is the reality this channel is building for, here and now through the body perceived as Troy, New York. And this feels like just the beginning of a fresh round of growth. Big growth.